is possible. I've tried to be positive and show.
Right, wow.
Baroness Armstrong, it's fantastic to meet you. I'm so excited that I'm going to get to spend this time to get to know you a little bit. I'd like to start at the beginning with your childhood. What was it like and what are some of your strongest memories?
Oh, I grew up in a family where, firstly, my grandparents lived with us. So I had a grandfather who had worked in the shipyards, and my gran was an incredible needlewoman. She crocheted the most beautiful tablecloths and all sorts of things. And she just was a lovely, kind, patient woman. So they were there. Mum and Dad were both school teachers. Dad was on the council. So we always were talking about what was going on in the world, what was going on locally, and I became very aware of the importance of manufacturing, essentially, because Sunderland had made its name and its way through both coal mining and shipyard working.
What kind of values did your parents instill in you? Was it the values around public service?
Yes. I remember my dad saying to my brother and I, whatever you do, we will continue to love you and support you, but in some of your life, you have a responsibility to other people. I always knew that even though people in our area didn't do well at school, they were capable of it. And we had to do things to actually make sure that those who didn't do well got a chance. And a lot of my life has been about that. How do you actually make sure that folk are able to reach their full potential?
In terms of the voluntary service that you went on overseas, what was that experience like and how did it kind of inform you going forward?
VSO changed my life. I learnt so much about myself, but also the world. You know, I was away for 2 years in Kenya before the internet, before you could easily communicate with the UK. And you just had to get on with it.
So after voluntary service, you have this experience. You return home, and then what's the vision for the next part of your life?
Well, I'd been given a place, offered a place to do my social work diploma in Birmingham. And I went to Birmingham and had a remarkable tutor. He was a great man. He again felt that you had to work with people who were disadvantaged. So he got me working in a local adventure playground, which was a bit outside my comfort zone, but I knew I wanted to go back to the northeast. So there was a really good director in Sunderland who decided that it would be very good for the town if in the poorer areas, the more difficult areas, there were community work projects. And I went to Southwick, which was the area of the town that my mum had grown up in, my grandparents came from, and I went back there to set up a community work project. And out of that came a neighbourhood youth project. And we were looking at what was happening in the area. The shipyards were closing. And what do you do? What do you do for young people to actually give them a chance?
And the community projects that you started still exist today?
They do. I started work here, in about 1973. And this was set up formally 42 years ago. So tell me what it's like now.
Now, I think young people are still quite disillusioned with what they're going to do when they leave school. Those issues still exist in Southwick. It wasn't just the closure of the shipyards and then everything, you know, was great. You've got, you know, generations of families where the aspirations are so low that young people often don't even get the chance to leave Southwick, never mind Sunderland. So our role as a youth project is to try and broaden those horizons for the young people.
So, half term, what's going on this week?
This week, half term February, is quite busy. Today we are working with 50 young people aged 5 to 11. We're going to be making carnival headdresses, and then we'll have the circus coming in.
Are you going to paint the pool? Or are you going to paint somebody else's pool?
What made you decide to become an MP?
Well, I always knew when I was working either as a social worker or as a community worker that there were things that the state was responsible for, the system was responsible for, that I wanted to change. But you had to change those opportunities. You had to change the way the system ran if you were really going to help them. So I decided I was going to put my name forward. You know, at that stage, very few women were getting anywhere. But myself and Mo Molam and Joyce Quinn were the 3 women from the North East who became candidates. We were great friends because we'd all decided whatever they were saying, they weren't going to be able to say they couldn't choose women because there were none putting themselves forward.
Thinking now about your career in politics, I know you worked closely with Tony Blair. What are some of your memories of that time?
I worked on particular things that were important to him and that were important to me too, and I eventually was shadowing local government.
So while you're working closely with Tony Blair, the Gulf crisis happens. What was that like?
Well, I'd just been appointed Chief Whip earlier in the year. Wars at any time for anybody is a really difficult issue, and we had several members in the parliamentary party who were really on the pacifist wing, and Tony was very sensitive to that. Every parliamentary party meeting he would address them and say, I know that some of you have got real differences with me about this. We have to talk about this in a way where we respect each other's position. So yes, it was a crisis, but it also meant that I learnt about the parliamentary party and I learnt about how to deal with them.
Tell me about how you became a member of the House of Lords.
Well, I have to say most Chief Whips end up in the House of Lords. Most Chief Whips from the Commons end up in the Lords, because when you're Chief Whip in the Commons, you don't get to speak. And so I think most Prime Ministers think they ought to recognise that they've had somebody looking after things that, and you know, whatever else politicians can do, they can normally talk. So I announced that I was leaving and was then nominated by the then Prime Minister Gordon Brown.
What about life outside of politics? Tell me about the Black Cats.
Yes, I'm burdened with being a Sunderland football supporter. But, you know, it's one of the passions of people in the North East. My husband takes the mickey out of me relentlessly about it now. But it's just the way I am. I've learnt to like cricket because he likes cricket. And I love theatre and drama. And he is fanatical about Shakespeare, so we go to a lot of Shakespeare too.
What specific skills and experience do you think that you bring to the House here?
I'm quite good at negotiating. That was what you had to do as Chief Whip. But I also bring a breadth of knowledge and understanding about working with people with complex needs, partly because I was a social worker, but most of all, what I've concentrated on doing is making sure that people who don't have a voice are nonetheless heard. But we also, in committee, look at a lot of issues in a lot of depth. So I chair the Public Services Committee now. And so, as a chair of a select committee in the House of Lords, I meet with the Deputy Lord Speaker to talk through with him issues that committees are dealing with that are often procedural. Have we got the right resource and the right support? Are we able to get government to come to meetings, to get ministers to come? Are they making sure that they respond to our reports in the given time? And we can bring together experts, we can bring together people who are using services to really let their voice be heard where decisions are being made and where government has to listen.
So I hope that the government thinks again, sees how it can systematically ensure that there is proper attention to how to enable these communities to access decent services. It is possible. I've tried to be positive and show that it is possible, but it has to be done throughout the NHS and systematically in partnership with those people who know what it's like to have difficulty to access services because they've been excluded for so long, and really make sure that we make a massive difference on tackling these health inequalities.
And you've been very involved in making sure that there is support for women who've been abused.
Yes, I was involved way back in Sunderland, establishing one of the first refuges that there was in this country. And that became an area where I just developed and kept that interest going all the way through my life.
And you were also the chair of Changing Lives. Tell me about that.
Well, I chaired that for about 10 years. And that was just an amazing experience of developing work and supporting work around the country to tackle how women who had complex needs, largely through abuse or neglect, how you help them to turn their lives around. And I have seen and worked with women up and down the country in that position, and it's really inspirational.
Hi, Hilary, come on through. This is a theatre house, Changing Lives, so this is our office space actually. This is one of our lovely rooms or apartments within Athena, so this is a self-contained apartment. There's 8 of these, all mirror image within the building, along with the smaller room, which is our crash pad, which is for somebody coming in on a shorter term basis, more of an emergency basis.
I was going to say, that must be an emergency.
Yeah.
It seems to me that it's really good that women can develop their independent living skills, but that, you know, if they're really feeling anxious about anything or worried about anything, staff are there to help out if there's a crisis, if there's anything going wrong.
Staff 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Right,
and
brilliant.
The biggest goal is to promote independent living for these women who might have not been given this chance before or not had this sort of environment to live in on their own. So yeah, it's a great opportunity for someone that really wants to make a positive change to their life.
Brilliant, brilliant.
What would you say that you're most proud of?
I'm proud that when I was in the government, we were really able to tackle rough sleeping, and we had the ambition that we would reduce rough sleeping by over 2/3 within 3 years. And we did that. I learned an enormous amount during that time, but I also learned you can get people inside. You can sort this problem out. It just takes determination, effort, and enough beds in places to get them housed and so on. And I'm proud of the fact that the House of Lords now has a much better understanding of the position of people with complex needs, particularly women. Now, that doesn't mean to say I think we've sorted the problem. That doesn't mean to say I think everything is fine, but they do know that I will raise this again and again and again, so that our response to women with complex needs is much better than it is at the moment.